Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but if like you want to look like a certain athlete that you admire for whatever reason, maybe you need to train that way to some regard within your ability and your, your skill set and the other demands you have in your life.
I always, that episode at ESPN, The Body Issue, always trips me out so much because you just get to see across, like, they have like Rob Gronkowski in there, and then they'll have a professional swimmer, and then a sprinter, and then a linebacker, and a volleyball player. And you just see like each of these sports really does change the body type so much for the performance of what's demanded in that setting. And I was actually listening to a podcast you did, and I thought that this was so interesting about fat content and buoyancy for open water swimmers. And I never thought about that before, because I think when you consider elite anything, you also conflate that with just optimal body type, like lean mass, no excess fat, and all for the reason of being like more athletic and driven. But then here's an instance where, or I guess there's an argument, or maybe like the school of thought is a little split on it, but that having this excess body fat on purpose can actually be a benefit to your ability to stay on track in open water where current and waves and things have a tendency to push you around.
In fact, I posted something on floating this week that's been getting kind of like some viral feedback on it, but just people engaging
on floating, like just static buoyancy.
Just on being able to float. Yeah. And I'm arguing that everyone can float. Yes, body fat's going to affect that, bone density, lung volume, things like that, but everyone can float. You just need to work on it. And a lot of people are like, oh, I'm a sinker, or I'm all muscle mass, or I'm dense bone, and I'm going to sink. It's a skill, which maybe we could talk about. But sports are interesting. Open water swimming is a sport 100%, but the demands of it are very unique because in some ways, maybe gaining some of the body fat that might keep you warm in the cold water could actually maybe make you not swim as fast. Mm-hmm. Statistically, I haven't looked at it, but I know, like, I've looked at some statistics on like body fat percentages on like the top 6 people, like on the podium, for example, and they fit into like a statistical standard or norm. So like if you want to be top 6, like cross country skier, those guys and gals are probably all single digit body fat.
Totally. Yeah.
Swimming, it's a little different. We see a lot of lean swimmers, but we also see swimmers who are very fit, but aren't necessarily like super striated and ripped, so to speak. So it
Why
depends
is that?
on the.
Do you think?
I think we all have different genetics and different nutritional strategies, and some of the leanest swimmers that we see are actually leaning into strength training in a big way, which is like part of my niche and my agenda or my message. But I've been looking at it a lot and just looking at some really elite swimmers, and they're not all completely ripped the way we might think of it. They're lean and slim, maybe for a swimmer standards. Bulk is not necessarily beneficial for swimming, but a little bit of body fat might have an advantage. I don't know to what extent at the highest level. The conversation I kind of struck up this week on social media was I want to dig into this a little bit and see, can we quantify like body fat to buoyancy and how it might change, I don't know, propulsion and your ability to move through the water. I'm not quite sure.
So I don't know a ton about open water swimming other than I can imagine the gravity of the challenge of the situation and why you're supported when you do it and the ability to veer off track and all these kind of things. But if I'm thinking about it from like an energy standpoint, is there part of it that could be the fat metabolism? Like it's better to have fat stores on deck for, let's say it's a 100-kilometer swim is 62 miles or something like that. So that's a long, super long swim. And I don't know, maybe you can explain if that's broken up into stages or not. But if you're talking about that kind of endurance, you're not going to be anaerobic. Now we're getting like a little nerdy about it, but you're not going to be anaerobic that whole time because you couldn't be. So if you're more aerobic, then you're going to metabolize fat better. So if you have more fat in storage, do you think that there's like an energy trade-off thing going on there, and that's why you would see that body type in that sport?
I think even the leanest person has more than enough body fat stores calorically to sustain like a very long effort. One thing to point out, like I think swimming 100 kilometers is like, I think only maybe 2 people have done that.
Nice. but not the best example.
Yeah, it's a handful. I mean, that would be tremendous. Other people have done like swims like that in stages, and it's more than 2 people. It's a handful of people. But you have enough body fat to sustain that effort. So, people are swimming for up to like 2 days, 40, 50 hours of swimming, much the way we're seeing like ultra marathon and other type of events, and you can sustain it. These athletes are also fueling throughout with carbohydrates, because even though it is mostly an aerobic effort, there are elements, there's the glycolytic efforts where you're burning carbohydrates as fuel. So they're fueling with carbohydrates. They're highly trained aerobic fat burning, athletes as well. But we all have enough body fat to sustain that type of effort. I don't know. I'd have to think really